Are we ready to go?
Yeah, you're fine now, Scott. Off you go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you all for attending. So what we're going to talk about today is some maintenance improvements we've made at Wimbledon. So I thought I'd just give you a quick introduction to Wimbledon Patch. So we work for Network Rail. We're part of the southern region. We're on Wessex route and we're part of the inner delivery unit. And I'm the Tarmier for Feltham, so I get two sections. So I've got Feltham section and Wimbledon section. Today we're mainly concentrating on Wimbledon. And on this map here, you'll see Wimbledon is in fact the grey patch here. So this is the main line Waterloo to Bournemouth, which runs through here. Our section is just countryside of Clapham Junction there. We run through to Berrylands. Our branch lines run from Rains Park to Epsom. We've got the Chessington branch. We have a boundary with Sussex at Ewell East here. We have a boundary with Sussex at Box Hill. We've got Leatherhead down to Box Hill. We have a boundary at Effingham Junction. We've got Leatherhead to Effingham Junction line as well. So really the patch is two contrasting railways. We have the main line, which is very heavily trafficked. So the fast lines, they're all Cat 1, 75 miles an hour. It's 45 EMGPTA. The slow lines, they're Cat 1 to Rains Park. They're slightly slower, they're 60 miles an hour, but they're still 33 EMGPTA. So as Andy mentioned at the start, we really have to keep our eye on the ball, particularly with the fast lines. They're not very forgiving, and this is where a lot of our challenges have come from. In terms of the branch lines, they don't give us so many issues. They're Cat 3 and above. We do have some freight. We've now recently opened freight service going to Chessington South. We have a Tolworth freight service as well. The thing that does they have both lines have in common is desiccation affects the branches and the main lines, but that is a different story. So our presentation today is made up of a number of small items, things that we're trying to do to improve the way we work, the way we manage the infrastructure. It's nothing massively revolutionary on their own, but yes, we're just trying to improve the way we do things. So I'm going to be looking at adjustment switches, also dip angle management of IBJs. We've had a few broken IBJs over the years. 3M management, that is about trying to reduce our reaction to short notice defects. Workbank management, that is looking at backlog. Modular bearer upgrades, we've had some issues with modular bearers. Crossing management, well, it's going to take us through what we've done to improve reliability of crossings. Looking at rail defect management, which we call level 1 over 2 nights, which will become clear. Matangi is going to take us through a defect paper, and Walid's going to finish discussing people. So we start off with adjustment switches. We've had two broken adjustment switches during my time here at Wimbledon and Feltham. So in 2014, we had a broken adjustment switch at Leatherhead. And in 2020, we had a broken adjustment switch at Richmond. They were both block the line defects. They had a large performance impact. We were quite fortunate with the Richmond one that was actually on a Sunday and trains got diverted around the Hounslow Loop. If that had been a midweek, we'd have had a lot more delays. There's a picture for you of the Leatherhead one, and this is Richmond. So this obviously led to us considering a review of our management of adjustment switches. So things like dip angles. This is the Richmond one. It was actually at 28 millirads when it broke, which is below actionable limits. And the run that was 4 weeks earlier, it was actually below 20 millirads. So that got worse pretty quickly, probably due to the wet bed, which you can see there. So actioning wet beds in a timely manner on adjustment switches is important, more than you would obviously do it for plain rail. We've had issues with bearers. These were retrofitted with concrete bearers 10 years ago, but they haven't performed very well. So we've actually put wooden bearers back underneath because we find them more compliant. So that's something we've done. But in the back of my head was more fundamentally, are some of these adjustment switches actually required to be in track? Because if you can remove them, then you're obviously removing that risk altogether. So I got in touch with our structures team, head of assets, commissioned a review of adjustment switches around structures. I sent them a list of all our adjustment switches around structures and asked, from their perspective, are they actually required to be there? And I had a very positive response. So all the ones that are on ballasted bridges, they said that we could remove. And at most of the smaller wheel timber bridges, we were also able to get permission to remove them. The large ones, the four big stains, the Thames bridges, they needed to stay. I also looked at reviewing unstressed S&C. So a lot of our S&C was from the 70s. It's on wood. Probably when it was laid, it was put in with built-up crossings. But over the years, all our crossings now are cast manganese with weldable legs. The switches have got enough heel blocks to be stressed. So we're going through a program of strengthening and stressing S&C where we can. So since January 2020, where we started a purge on this, we've removed 23 sets of adjustment switches. So the ones on the M3, the M25, Isleworth, Hampton Wick, Q, we stressed the S&C at Q. Motzer Park Junction, we've stressed. This is the ones at Leatherhead that broke. There's 4 sets there, they're all out. We did some stressing at Ascot recently, and we've got more planned. Motzer Park Junction and Staines. So we've been doing this ourselves, and our heavy maintenance unit have also been doing some of that. So the benefits are obviously less maintenance, less to go wrong. And the lesson I took from that was it's worth asking the question. Some things are just in place and you presume that they're supposed to be there, when actually it's always worth asking the question, can we remove it, or questioning why things are actually as they are. So we're making good progress with that. Next, we look at IRJ dip angle management. So this is a cut from the standard TRK 001 module 11, which tells us what we have to do when we get a dip angle exceedance. So all our lines are less than 90 miles an hour, so we're looking at this. So we don't have to do anything until greater than equal to 40 millirads, and then this will tell you what you're supposed to do. Inspect within 14 days, replace within 13 weeks. But if anybody has ever seen a glued Edlon at 40 millirads, it's almost at the point of failure. And we'd had a few of these. So this was a particularly nasty one. This was a Benkler Durnsford Road 707 points in February 2018. It had a wrong side hazard rating of 84. So this dip angle was 32.74 recorded before it broke. So considerably less than 40. And then the previous recording to that was late 17, and that was 22.7. So you can see that dip angles can very quickly get worse when we're talking about the line speed and tonnage that we're dealing with here at Wimbledon. We've now put in a new standard for Wimbledon that we, if we get a greater than 20 millirad dip angle fault on the fast lines, we are putting that in RDMS, which is our rail defect management system, as a 13-week removal. And the slow lines, we've agreed that we'll do it within 26 weeks. So we put that in as a 26-week into RDMS. So there was a small bow wave, but we currently have none over 20 millirads on BML1, and that's the way we want it to stay. I'll now look at 3M management. So 3Ms are defects that are inspect only, and we're not required to action them. But we've had a number where we've had, they've sat at 3M for a long time, then they've turned into a 3H, and an H is a 4-week defect. So this is a cut from TRK 001 module 7. And we're looking here at rail ends, which is this within fishplate limits. So principally for us, IBJs. And if you notice, all the track categories, it's 3M for up to 10 mil and less than 50 millimeters long. But the next action on these is once it gets longer than 50 millimeters or deeper than 10 millimeters, all jumps to 3H, which is a 4-week. And that can be very disruptive to maintenance plans access, we can struggle getting access, and we lose work. So what we're trying to do is look at our 3Ms in RDMS, the ones at rail ends. We're not in a position to do all 3Ms, but at rail ends, picking ones that when we get down to 8mm depth, then we're upgrading these to a 3C defect in RDMS. So that's 13-week removal, with the aim to try and prevent this 4-week, which leads to a knee jerk and disruption to our plans. I'll speak now about Workbank management. So our Workbank is managed by a system called Ellipse. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it has all our work in it. It has work arising. So this is work that's found through inspections, whether by people or by trains. So things like wet beds, sleepers, fastening issues, all manner of items. And it also contains MSTs. These are maintenance scheduled tasks. So these are cyclical, principally normally inspections. So like asset inspection, supervisor inspection, technical inspection, engineers, but also cyclical work such as fish plate greasing, hot weather management, that sort of thing. All that sits in our Ellipse system, and it all has a required finish date. So you have this enormous amount of work all counting down. But with the work arising, prior to us doing this exercise, none of that was actually aligned to any sort of plan. So you have a massive amount of work sitting there, counting down, with no actual planned date. This, of course, leads to a large amount of backlog and endless reprioritizations to meaningless sort of unplanned dates. So you're looking through, say, for example, sleepers. You just add another 6 months on if you think they'll last that long, or 12 months, or etc. But there's no actual planned date. Then when 6 months comes around, you find these sleepers are back again under your nose. And the other problem with this is, apart from sort of wasting planners and supervisors' time, is that you can't see the wood for the trees. So in amongst that backlog, there might be some really important MSTs that have been missed, or some sleepers that were actually really poor condition that actually need work. So there's a visibility issue. So what we did was we've introduced this Workbank management process, which was not, we didn't come up with this. This was Column, Kavanagh and Alex McLean, but we just adopted it. So the principle is you have 3 job banks. The first job bank has all your MSTs. So that's what, as I just described, all cyclical activity that's mandated in the standards are put in this job bank 1. Job bank 2 is for planned work. So all work arising items that are committed to a work plan and have a required finish date aligned to the actual week it's planned to be delivered. So this includes faults and defects, geometry, actionable defects. So when we do our quarterly plan, we're pulling out work out the job bank and we're putting the correct required finish date onto the week it's actually planned to take place. And work group 3 is a general job bank. So the only sort of way I changed this process was I split this into 2. So of this job bank 3, we've got one we called Q, which is work groups ending in Q contain items that need completion. So this would normally be items that are priority M12 or due within 12 months or 2 years. So that when we come to do a quarterly plan, we've got a job bank of work that we actually want to plan that needs to be done. All the rest have got in work banks called J, which they're all at M99, which is 99 years, and they're sitting there. So these are things like your sort of single broken sleeper or cracked sleeper that we're not concerned with, but has been picked up by inspection staff. So it's important that it's there, but it's kind of, we don't want to get it mixed up with stuff that we actually want to do. So we split those 2 up. We did a one-off reprioritisation exercise going through the job bank, and the rules around this are that any jobs in P, which is our planned job bank, which is the work group 2, cannot be reprioritised without the SM and TME approving. So the result has been a large reduction in backlog. So you can see, I'll put both sections on here, particularly Feltham came down, if the scales are different, came down, you can tell when we did this exercise, and they're still down here at they sort of 50 or below, and Wimbledon, we did it around this sort of time here, and the scales are different, but Wimbledon is still on 50 or below. So, but it's not just a numbers exercise, it means now that backlog is actually a meaningful conversation at PDR, and things are reprioritised with some thought, and anything that actually needs to be doing, we can pick up. It also helps with business volume delivery. So it's easy for me now when people ask, oh, how many wet beds are you planning to do? How many bearers are you planning to do? I can just filter the job bank for job bank P, and I can show that what we've got planned. It also allows me to see, or us to see, how much work we're delivering versus the plan, because if we're doing lots of reprioritisations, it means we're not delivering the plan work. So it helps us to monitor levels of change and whether work's getting deferred, which might highlight any risks that we need to raise. So personally, that's been one of the best things that we've done as far as I'm concerned. It's been really helpful. So it's a great process. I'll now move on to modular bearer upgrades. So we've had a number of issues with modular bearers, particularly at Wimbledon West, when this was relayed. So you'll notice here that there's screws missing. So the issues always begin with loose screws and then snap screws around the nose. So we had Hull Masters, who are a special company that deal with concrete, to drill out these snap screws, reset them in the concrete on numerous occasions, but the repairs don't last. And this has also contributed to some of the failures in crossings that we've had, which Walid will talk about shortly. So what we've decided to do was, well, this shows how, as well as the screws coming loose, they actually started to crack. So these bearers were actually breaking before we took them out. So what we've actually decided to do is retrofit through bearers around the nose. So it's always around the nose is the problem, which is the a discontinuity. So none of the other screws have come loose. So if you replace the bearer under the nose and two either side, it solves the problem. So our heavy maintenance unit, this is them doing work at Wimbledon West. We've done some ourselves at Durnsted Roads, and we're working through a prioritised programme to replace those. And in terms of track renewal, our strong preference is through bearer. So Dave Norcutt, who specs our renewals, he's made that clear. And where this is not possible, now a hybrid is being specified. So this is Twickenham, which is relayed in September, and you'll notice there are modular bearers here, but the ones around the nose have got a proper through bearer. So from my point of view, it's excellent that people have taken on board the feedback and the issues that we've had with modular bearers, and now renewals are actually being specified and delivered to how we want, and people have listened to that feedback. So that is great. I'm now going to pass to Walid, who's going to do some crossing management.
Yeah, just to talk about crossing management, obviously our biggest performance risks at Wimbledon is crossings and defects associated with them. Following multiple catastrophic failures for the Wimbledon corridor, which racked up thousands of minutes of delay, we was challenged to come up with a different way of thinking and a different maintenance plan to help us manage our crossings better. And sitting with the TME and my supervisors, a new strategy was formulated by risk assessing every single crossing on the main line and risk scoring them as high risk, medium risk and low risk. At the moment, we've got 54 units on the BML1, and part of the regime included two different elements. One was the inspection side of things, and the second was the cyclical maintenance. Inspection, some crossings, so the 1054 standard dictates we have to inspect them every 6 monthly on a Cat 1 track. We chose to go above that by inspecting them every 3 months instead. And our aim of changing the frequency was to allow us to pick up any minor defects sooner, so we can tackle them, i.e. lipping type of defects, squat related defects, get some maintenance grind done to prevent the defect escalating. And cyclical maintenance, which played a key part in this regime, was every single crossing we introduced a new regime for by apologies. So, and a new standard job was raised for all the crossings that included MSTs in the job bank for SNC complete treatment, and they were set at a frequency of 4 weekly, 8 weekly, 12 weekly, and 16 weekly. And that allowed us and the team to go in at a set time to do any lifting and packing required, tighten the screws, change fastenings, do general maintenance throughout the whole unit and not just the crossing. And this is to pick up any voiding and remove it. A local TEF was created with the TME that allowed us to capture the history of any work carried out during these inspections, and we keep that on record. The strategy had allowed us to reduce the defects. We had some good wins, and we had some really good wins. So as you can see, this is the delay minutes and the delay minutes cost since we introduced it. So the strategy was introduced in 2020. We've gone from averaging over 3,000 minute delay to 254 the first year we introduced it. And then the following year we had one crossing where it caused 2,530 minute delay. And that came about the same time as the red zone working, where we had to stop all red zone working. Part of the defect required it to be inspected hourly, and due to its location, multiple line blockages were required to get in and out to carry out that inspection. But also that defect, it was not a standalone defect as such. There was a series of defects in the area, which Matangi will be touching on in her study in a bit. No, that's
Okay.
Thank you, Walid. I'm just going to briefly touch on subject rail defect management. So this, what we call prolonged stress restoration, or level 1 over 2 nights. So the issue here was that we have a large number of defects at Wimbledon, particularly on the far sides, and never enough time to restore stress on the night on most of our lines. So this leads to a considerable number of unstressed sites and or lots of extra work to carry out full level 2 restresses. So the solution was developed by Andy Jones for use on Wessex. This is where you change the rail in night 1 and then you restore the stress in night 2. This is a cut from his updated standard. So this procedure is for use with over consecutive shifts. Can only be used replacement defective rail, obviously not for broken rails. It's plain line only, and you're only allowed to carry out on track of this type of fastening. The person in charge has to be briefed by the head of asset or myself, and they have to hold a level 2 stressing competence. And we're required to keep a register where this procedure has been used, which we do every week in our PDR. We review these. So this process is the same as a normal level 1, except you have some extra intermediate telltale. So you've got inner, intermediate, and outer. If you get any movement on either of these, the inner or the intermediate, then you unkey up to the outer and stress that. It's game over. If either the outer telltales have moved, then you have to do a full re-stress. But the result for us has been that effectively we've created no pink form or unstressed sites throughout the entire year through plain line defect removal, which has left us in an excellent place approaching hot weather. And it's been an absolute boon. The only unstressed sites we create are when we change units of S&C, which we have a plan to catch up anyway. But yeah, effectively, we're not creating any pink forms, and we're not going back and repeating work by going back and restressing sites. So this has been excellent for us.
Yeah.
Over to Matangi now.
So the crack crossing that Walid was talking about was placed right in between a heavy squat hotspot. So that was the main driver between doing that in-depth rail analysis of what was happening in Wimbledon. So for those of you who don't know, but I'm pretty sure most of you all know, squats are characterized by cracking and depression of the running surface, and they can propagate downwards transversely, which can potentially cause rail fractures and broken rails. And they cause such a big concern to the railway due to their ability to incur significant maintenance costs. So I did a download of RDMS from 1st of January 2021 to 1st of January 2022, just 1 year of the top 10 plain line defects in the whole of UK's network. And as you can tell, even excluding squats at rail end and squats on a weld, just squats themselves take a good chunk of rail defects. So that's 4,822, which is over 4 times the amount of transverse defects. So that was the main driver of why we wanted to do an in-depth review of what was happening with squats in Wimbledon. So in Wimbledon, 68% of our rail defects are squats, and they were mostly on the up fast lines and the down fast lines. So a total of 354 squat defects were discovered over 3.5 years. That on average puts us at 2 squat defects per week, and 60% of the discovered squats were actionable defects. Therefore, out of the 2 squat defects discovered per week, 1 is actionable. And this is problematic because it throws out all the proactive maintenance work the section's put together due to us having to go out and do reactive works. So the 36-hour and 7-day rectification scale of defects required ESRs, and due to the large amount of trains using the main lines, it's a severe impact on performance, which in turn incurs a significant amount of delay minute charge. So it's important to understand the causes of rail squat defects to develop or try and develop a maintenance strategy so we can go forward with our preventative works instead of always getting them shot down by all the reactive works we have to do to deal with the squat defects. So the main aim, I say, would be to understand the progression of rail squat clusters to develop a rational maintenance strategy consisting of preventative and early corrective works. So what I did was I got the whole of Wimbledon patch and I looked out for squat clusters. So that's any places on the whole patch where there's a significant amount of squats all put together in a small amount of rail. So I looked at the BML1 up and down fast lines between Earlsfield and Berrylands, and from this exact example, there were 13 squats identified from November 2019 to present, which was at the time would have been around mid-June last year. And these 13 defects were classified as 3Ms, 2Bs and 2Cs. And the initial squat was found at 5 mile 31 on the 20th of November 2019. And within 9 months of its detection, an additional 12 squats were found along the left-hand rail surface up until 5 mile 60. And from that, taking from that, we kind of came to the conclusion that one squat could lead to the creation of multiple subsequent squats, which in this presentation, we've called that one squat that can lead to subsequent squats, the catalyst squat. And it can be noted that once that one squat made other squats, those other squats can then in turn feed into making new succeeding squats in the direction of the moving train. It was also found that subsequent squats had a high rate of deterioration, whilst the catalyst squat remained stable. So out of the 12 squats identified, there were 3 3Ms, which got escalated to 3 2B defects. So these 3 squats that got escalated were initially found in November 2019, and they retested as stable up until June 2020, where they came out and got retested to be 2Cs. And when looking at this data, we noticed that there was a squat that got identified around 5 mile 51 chains in May 2020 that came in before the other 3 defects got escalated to becoming 2C defects. So from that, we took that one squat within the squat defect cluster clearly has a detrimental effect on the deterioration rate of all the subsequent squats. So in the scope of this presentation, we'll call this the catastrophic squat. And then I was looking around at papers to see what could be like accountable for this behavior. And there was a paper done by Lee that said that a light squat is a surface irregularity that can lead to exciting dynamic forces of certain wavelengths with a series of peaks. And with these peaks, because they're repeated at every wheel passage at the same location, localized ratcheting occurs. At the time, I didn't know what ratcheting was, but I did find out what it was. It is the wheel rail rolling contact process. The rail is subjected to cyclic loading, and the rail degradation modes, wear and rolling contact fatigue are a result of the accumulation of plastic deformation under this constant cyclic loading. So, yeah, so this was from his study. So he found squat A, and then over a period of time, there was that cyclic force loading that kept going, and it turned squat A to squat B, which is clearly much larger. And if you were to properly map code it against network rails standard, it will probably come up to have a more serious map code. And then due to, even though the plastic deformation might be really small, because of all the trains that we get, there's so many cycles of loading that the plastic deformation accumulates to larger values, which then causes the squat to deteriorate and have higher a more serious map code and shorter rectification scale. And due to the localized nature of cyclic ratcheting, it also explains that why within a cluster, the squat that we've called the catastrophic squat always is located one chain away from the subsequent squats that it has an effect on. And just to make it a bit more simplified, the green stars are the catalyst squats, the red stars are your catastrophic. So the 2 green stars create all the blue stars, and then when the red ones, which are the catastrophic squat, comes into play, it causes the escalation of all the subsequent squats it had. So the 3Ms got escalated to 2B, and then yet another 3M got escalated to 2B, which you can see by the red arrows. And then what we noticed is that since we removed the catalyst squat in June 2020, there has been no additional squats found within this cluster. And it's a pretty big bet to say that's the only thing that's causing it. So we decided to look at other factors such as rail age and the trace to see if it was track geometry. So when we looked at rail age, there was no smoking gun. There was pretty much different rail ages across all the board, across every single squat cluster. There was nothing that was jumping out at us. There was a fair amount of 2012 rail, but not enough for us to turn around that was problematic. And then when looking at the trace for the cluster, the trace before that the initial squat had been found compared to the trace when there was all the squats were pretty much the same. So it just demonstrates that it's possibly not poor track geometry that played a part in the escalation of the defects found in the cluster. And then coming to the example of the cracked crossing that caused, I think it was over 2,000 delay minutes. What happened was we've got our catalyst squat, which is the green star that's come in 2019, which has caused the blue stars found in 2020 and December 2020 and July 2020. And then when the catastrophic squat came in, which is the red star found in April 2021, it then caused the subsequent squats to escalate. So we've got the 3M defect that got escalated to a 3H, and then we've got another 3M that got escalated to a 3H, which then actually ended up causing it Edelon to break. And then right at the middle of it, you see the crossing nose, which was damaged prior. However, when the catalyst squat came in around April 2021, within 2 months, the crossing nose broke. So it kind of has a snowball effect. You get one squat that causes loads of other squats. And then within that, you'll get one squat that eventually comes in and causes really rapid deteriorations of all the squats that are in the cluster, which can then end up having really serious consequences like broken eddelons and broken crossings, which then causes us to put ESRs out. It's really tight rectification scales. And then it's really difficult to deal with that, especially now with no red zone working. It throws a lot of our plans out of place. So not only was there was them two, I did this so much, there was them two defect clusters, and to establish a pattern to see whether this was just a one-off thing, we looked at the whole of the patch and found another, I think it's 6 different squat clusters which showed similar findings and trends. And then once you eliminate rail age and trace, we were honestly thinking there has to be some kind of relationship between squats causing deterioration of other squats. But there is a lot of further work that you can do with this. You can obviously find out how to determine the root cause of the actual initial squat, because in addition to your track geometry, there could be damaged train wheel sets, rail surface floor that could create the formation of squats. And then also within a cluster, it was that what we found was the catastrophic squat was always located a chain away. And further work is obviously needed to actually determine the location of the catastrophic squat. And once you determine that location of the catastrophic squat, you can implement a maintenance plan to get rid of it as quick as possible. Because right now, not knowing where that catastrophic squat lies is problematic, because every squat to come in, you won't know whether it's just another subsequent squat created from the catalyst, or whether it's one that's just gonna take everything out and cause a ruckus on track. And then as for removal of 3M squats, because we want to start actioning, as Scott said before, trying to get on top of our 3Ms, we won't actually know what the time scale is for a 3M squat to escalate into let's say a 2C or a 3C. So further work can be done to see what time scales for removal to help us plan it. And that was pretty much my rail defect paper that I did here when I had spent my time in Wimbledon. There you go.
Thank you very much, Matangi. Well, I'll hand over to Walid for.
Yeah, the greatest challenge we faced at Wimbledon has to be our people. We came up with all these good ideas and stuff, but to implement them, we have to get people's buy-in. We have to get their engagement on board. Otherwise, we couldn't have achieved anything we've achieved so far. And by part of just getting our people on board was when we first started, we had low staff number, lack of training, low numbers on the night shift. So with the help of the IMDM, IME, we managed to increase the headcount from 29 at the time to 36. The IME helped us to organise training, so we had all the new people coming in within the first 3 months of them joining the railway. They had all the competencies they needed to get the job done. And by doing all that and showing our people we care, they bought into everything. They allowed us to do anything we brought to the table. They were on board to go out and deliver it. Because we can sit here and come up with 101 ideas. If we're not delivering on track, we're not going forward. So, yeah, the greatest challenge at Wimbledon been so far will be getting our people on board, because, as I said, without them, the journey wouldn't have started.
Thank you very much. That's all that we've got to say. So if anybody would like to ask a question or have any comments, then please do.
Thank you very much, Scott, Matangi and Walid, for that fantastic presentation, covering a wide range of stuff. There are some questions in the chat, so if I could invite the people who have asked the questions to come off mic. So Ian Ross, you've got a question. Can you come off mic and ask it? Off mute.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Yep. First off, thanks. Great presentation, and great to hear the work you're doing to make those incremental changes to keep the railway running smoothly and safely in the Wimbledon corridor. My question's around the adjustment switches that were removed off the long span steel bridges, and whether any risk assessment was carried out, mainly around the differential thermal movements between the track and the bridges themselves.
Well, the long span ones we weren't actually able to remove. So the big four that you would remember, the Richmond, Staines, Blackpots, Kingston, that they're not able to be removed, but it was the smaller ones that we were given permission for. I didn't personally do any risk assessment.
So there were some ballasted ones that have been removed though, the M3
Yes.
and M25. I'm just interested about those ones in particular. Was it just determined that because the track's ballasted, it's capable of moving independently of the bridge now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks very much. We have a question from Paul Ebbett. Paul, can you come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Fantastic. I've learned such a lot there about squats today. Thanks very much, and other bits and pieces as well. I was just so fascinated about the progression of those squats. So I do use the line as a customer, is that the right word, quite frequently, and I have heard comments about the Siemens rolling stock that's on the fast, on the main fast services. So my thought was, is the propagation of the squats perhaps linked to the Siemens rolling stock? I mean, is it worse on the fasts between Berrylands and Clapham Junction than the slows, where you tend to get less Siemens?
Yeah, we tend to get, I think the numbers are, there's a lot less squats on the slow lines that are on the fast lines, and the actual like real interaction between the rolling stock is something that we talked about, but it's not something we really have control over. It probably needs a lot more work to actually take a look at that. But considering that there's such a large difference in numbers between the squats found on the fast and the squats found on the slow, I'm pretty sure the rolling stock and the wheelbarrow interaction between the trains and the rail itself probably has a big effect on it.
Thanks. And I think it's so important to feed that back to the sort of whole system, rail system group, isn't it? That what an impact rolling stock can have. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paul. And we've got a question masquerading as a compliment, or maybe a compliment masquerading as a question from Bob Hazel.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, Scott, my comment there was that you made an old track engineer very happy today. I recall the days when you first joined us, probably in rail track days, and what a fantastic development and fantastic presentation by all three of you today. So thank you very much for that. Just some comments, really, as much as questions. It's great to see now you are tightening the dip angle. I was part of the introduction of dip angles when they introduced it on the trace. It came from nowhere. They took off cyclic top measurements on the trace and put dip angles, and there was nothing done for it. So I challenged that, and a lot of analysis was done, and there were thousands of them, too many for maintenance to deal with. And so 40 millirads was set at the trigger level, with the intention in those days to tighten the standard progressively as we got rid of and brought down the number of dip angles. So it's good to see that eventually, and I know that's been done on some of the high speed lines, but eventually that's now filtering down to some of the lower speed but most intensive routes. So brilliant work you're doing there. Good also to see that the 2-night stressing process has been adopted, because that's something I know we were looking at years ago. And some fantastic analysis that you and the team have been doing on squats, and that's really going to pay off in the future, I'm sure. Just a comment. I don't know what your biggest delay mini incident that you've had of late, but I can recall a 24,000 minute broken rail at Wimbledon West in my days when I was at Waterloo, and I guess a lot of that was because we didn't have service recovery the same as it is now. But it's good to see that some of the numbers you're quoting seem to have come down quite a bit. So that's fantastic. And just one more comment on adjustment switches on the where you've been required to keep them in. I wondered if you've looked at some of the new designs of expansion switches rather than adjustment switches, which are used on some of the high speed lines, whether they could be adopted for those sort of situations, because they certainly appear to be a lot more reliable and not prone to dip angles, and I don't think they're prone to the same sort of breakage. So a few comments there.
Thank you, Bob, for your kind words. Thank you for employing me. You're my first boss, so thank you.
Well,
yes, I will look new style adjustment switches. I haven't looked into that. I don't know much about that, but yeah, that's something we can take away. But thank you.
Excellent. Whilst some of you who are being shy coming forward with your questions, think about typing some in the chat box there. I'll just use chair's privilege and put the spotlight of interrogation onto Walid, if I may. So Walid, thank you very much for sharing your experience in front of a PWI audience. It's not often that we get to hear direct from section managers, so it's really refreshing to hear your testimony about what's going on. I've got a couple of things I wanted to ask. One was a technical one. So what do you think is the most effective technique for packing the track after you've to maintain this 20 millirads limit on your IBJs? What do you find is the best method of doing those geometry repairs to hit that limit?
The way we tackle them and stuff is MSPing.
Uh-huh.
So our guys go out with the sighting boards, lift them and put chipping underneath them.
It was part of the crossing care, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So the idea of the crossing care was to do the crossing nose, but also because we were on TI 21 track circuits, our IBJs principally round our S&C. So we were trying to pick up the IBJs with the S&C as well, if you see what I mean. Making that's what that TEF that you or the form that you came up with.
Yes, and it's sort of a link with your comments on people. How have you encouraged your people to get good at doing MSP?
We've got our lead, so we moved away from, we've got our lead track geometry team leader on night. We had Mark Paget come down and spend a few days with the team, going on a side and teaching them how to do it properly. And we also encourage them to use it all the time. So we go out scoping the jobs as part of our track geometry. We stopped doing track geometry during the day a while back. So as part of doing it on nights and making sure we've got effective repair on nights, we allow them a night beforehand to go and scope the jobs. They go out, look at the job, come back with a detailed plan to myself and my supervisor that looks after the track geometry, and they talk it through with us. And it's practice, basically. We allow them practice. We had really good people come down to show them how to do it.
Yep.
Fantastic. And the follow-up inspection. So once we go out and do geometry on nights, we have people going out a couple of shifts after once it's settled to make sure it's done to a good standard, and any feedback's fed straight to them. If we go out and we see them not doing something quite right, we just point them to the right direction. There's basically continuous teaching on the job. We're always learning, they're always learning.
That's great. Thanks very much. And it touches on the second question I wanted to ask, which was, I think, so you said that people was the greatest challenge, and you explained a little bit there about getting some more people involved and arranging training for your new starters. I suspect you did a lot more partly through your own sort of personal interventions and leaderships and stuff. Could you say any more about how you got people to gel as a team and to help you do all of these fantastic improvements that has been talked about this afternoon?
Yeah, so we've done a bit of work with Benchmark. We had Benchmark come in, do a few workshops and stuff. But I think the main thing is just be visible and be open to your people. So a lot of section managers get bogged down with a day job and they forget over half their staff work on nights. So they see their day staff all the time, but they don't see the night staff as much as they should do. So what I try to do is I try to see my night people at least once a week, where I'm out with them, spending time with them. And yeah, and everyone's opinion is valued at Wimbledon. So you could be an operative, you could be a team leader, you could be an engineer, you could be the IME. If anyone comes up with a good idea, we're more than willing to listen to it. I don't, and we don't shut down ideas. So if I'm doing a team brief and an operative speak about something, I'll make sure we listen to it, we follow it through. If it's not workable, we explain why it's not workable. It's getting everyone involved. You've got to get everyone involved. You can't just have the same voices speaking all the time. So if I do the briefs, I'll get the same people speaking. I'll make sure to ask someone a question that doesn't get quite involved, and after a while it becomes the norm.
Yep.
So the quiet people will become the people that speak, and then slowly but surely everyone in the room bringing ideas to the table. Because I might have a great idea, but they might have a better idea than me. That makes sense. It's just encouraging everyone's involvement. We are a team. So what we do at Wimbledon is not me, it's we do it as a team, we do it as everyone together.
Thank you very much, Walid. That's a really rich and informative answer. Thank you so much. We've just got time for one more question from Paul Ebbott about installation of modular crossovers. Paul.
I'm not actually sure we have got time for this, Andy, because I'm not familiar with installing these things. What I think is that this is probably a subject of another paper, to be honest, about the history of how modular crossovers came to be and experience. And I know there's been some incidents and accidents. So maybe let's part that one as a future paper for your program within the next couple of years, Andy, because I would love to learn more on that. And it's just, I assume you've had to change the way you put in these modular crossings and how it's deviated from the original idea. But I think best another paper another time, Andy, and I'd like to thank you for your excellent piece, all of you. Thanks.
All right, great stuff. So it's a couple of minutes early, but I'd like to use the couple of minutes just to say thank you to you as a team. The whole raison d'etre of the Permanent Way institution is to encourage people, share knowledge, and to celebrate the art of good track engineering. And there was so much in what you've shared with us this afternoon, which is worthy of that celebration. From Scott's unspectacular but consistent and dedicated and professional, steadily knocking things off one by one. So instead of a great big splashy thing, there is consistent improvement that you've achieved through implementing lots and lots of good practice across a range of things, from the attention to detail and technical expertise that Matangi showed in her rail defect analysis, and through the sheer sort of dedication and passion and excitement for maintaining track to a good standard, which Walid has demonstrated and explained in his pieces as well. I congratulate you all and thank you so much for spending an hour with us and sharing it with us all. Would everybody like to come off mute, please, and give them a round of applause? Thank you. Well done.